Hi, this is Kate from Generate Magic. So much of our frustration in life comes from making things more complicated than they need to be. And if you've ever tried to start a business, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm referring to. And so there's all sorts of people who claim to be experts giving advice on what it takes to run a successful business. And often this advice is very contradictory. Like some experts are saying that social media is where it's at and you need to start a TikTok channel or Instagram or whatever the latest trend is. And then another expert is telling you the exact opposite, that social is not where it's at all. And similarly, if you've ever tried to write a novel, there are so many questions that could be running through your head as you're doing it, asking yourself, well, should I write in first person or third person? Should I make this in past tense or present tense? How many characters should I include? And the problem with adding all these layers of unnecessary complication is that anytime that you feel the inspiration to write a novel or create a work of art or to start a business, that inspiration is coming to you from God or source. And so once you start to kind of second guess yourself and introduce doubt and uncertainty into the equation, then what you're doing is you're actually kind of creating I would call it like a disruption or a delay in the communication process between you and God. And you can kind of think of it like a hose. And if you've ever experienced the hose like getting twisted and kinked up, and then it actually stops the flow. And it's not like the water has completely disappeared, like the water is still there, but it's just that the channel has temporarily been blocked. And that's causing that water to flow. So in the same way, yeah, it's not like God never leaves you, like the divine is always there, but by kind of adding all these layers of unnecessary complication and confusion, what you're doing is you're blocking that flow, or you're kind of creating like an additional barrier between you and God. And you could certainly, I'm not saying you can't achieve your goals, certainly you can still arrive at your destination, but why not make it joyful and fun and flow-based rather than making it a journey filled with lots of struggle and frustration. And so another thing that I find problematic is the word should. And so whether you're listening to people who tell you what you should do to be successful in whatever it is you're endeavoring to do, or you're asking somebody else, well, what should I do? And no shame, like I've certainly done that. But what you're doing when you're asking the word should is you're actually kind of denying your own authority, and you're kind of you're giving away the power of your authority, and instead you're relying on the secondary source, which true, like some of these experts may have very valuable wisdom to offer, but at the same time they're not you, and so they can't possibly know with 100% certainty, what is the best decision for you. And so I like what Joseph Rodriguez always comes back to in our mastermind whenever people ask for advice. He says, well, it depends. And it's so true, right? There's so many different kind of factors to consider whenever we're deciding kind of how to move forward in whatever it is that we're doing. And one thing that has always well, not always, but one thing that's recently, and I mentioned it in the book, The Heavenly Life by James Allen, but he has a chapter in there, which I'm going to link to, called The Original Simplicity. And I encourage you to read or to listen to this chapter. And I feel like just by the process of osmosis, you'll naturally feel all these layers of unnecessary complication just naturally melting away. And you'll find yourself arriving at what James Allen refers to as the original simplicity. And I also feel that it comes down to, there's different terminology for this, but Joseph Campbell refers to it as following your bliss, and Bashar refers to it as following your excitement, but either way, it's the same concept. And I feel that excitement is literally God speaking through you. And so that's why it's a very exciting whenever you get the idea for a business or a novel or a work of art. And then certainly we can kind of experience some uncertainty whenever we're thinking of the next step. How do I go from here? But as you continue to follow your excitement, you'll find that the steps are revealed to themselves step by step, like as you go along. And it's all about listening and just being still and knowing that you are God, that you are one with God, and you are one with that divine inspiration that's flowing through you and as you. And also, what I like to do anytime that I find myself second guessing myself, or I find myself just doing something out of obligation because I feel like I should be doing it, but it's not because I necessarily want to be doing, I ask myself, well, is this really true? And one example is years ago, I used to love going to the gym. And this is when I was going to grad school and I had to read like a novel a week. And so I would actually go on the elliptical, and it was a really good way for me getting exercise and reading these novels at the same time. And I would usually go late at night, like after my classes were over. And there was something very peaceful about being in the gym late at night because it was practically empty then. And it was just a very joyful experience. But there got to be a time later in my life where going to the gym was no longer a joyful experience. In fact, it was quite the opposite. I actually started to dread going. And eventually I just kind of asked myself, is this really what I want? And so that's what you can do too, is when you find yourself, just kind of being pulled by obligation, ask yourself, is this what I want? Is this true that this is something that I have to be doing? Because sure, I could kind of come up with reasoning like, oh, I have to go to the gym to get my exercise. But even from a purely logical perspective, we can see that that isn't true, because there's many ways you can get exercise besides going to the gym. And so then doing something that does feel more joyful and does feel more aligned. And for me, I realized I was in walking distance of a very beautiful park, and so I could go on hikes. And then later on, that became dancing for me. But it's always just kind of, just following your excitement. And also there's something else that I wanted to share. When I was working on my last novel, there was something, I got this burst of inspiration to introduce a second narrator halfway through the novel. And I started to question it because I had never seen this done in a work of fiction before. And so I started to ask, well, should I do this? Like, how will the reader react to this? And then I told myself, wait a minute, this is my novel. I'm the one who's writing this. Nobody else is writing this. And so therefore I make the rules. And so I did decide to do that. And then when my editor was reading it, she loved that scene. And she went on and on about, how much she enjoyed that moment and how it really just made her excited to read the rest of the novel. And so this is just a lesson to you to always follow your excitement and to remove those layers of unnecessary complication that are robbing you of your joy and robbing you of your excitement. And to remember at the end of the day that you make the rules. And so with that, thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.